You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by the National Association of Convenience Stores.
Welcome to Convenience Matters. This is where we talk about things that matter to convenience stores. And if they matter to convenience stores, they matter to you because guess what? You've probably been to a convenience store today. If not, you'll be there tomorrow. 160 million transactions today, roughly half the U.S. population. So we have a lot of fun stories to tell because they involve consumers. And my name is Jeff Leonard. I'm with the National Association of Convenience Stores.
And I'm John Eichberg with the Fuels Institute at NACS. And Jeff, you're right. We talk about the convenience industry because it fuels our lives. It fuels our bodies through inside the store. It fuels our cars as you drive down the road. And it's an exciting time to talk about the market, and we're looking forward to today's conversation. And, it's really, I'm thrilled to welcome our guest, Christy Moore. Christy and I have known each other, 10 years, something like that. And there's very few people within the biofuels and ethanol industry that have a better technical grasp of the market. And we're really thrilled to have you on board today, Christy, so we can talk about ethanol and biofuels in the United States.
Hey, thanks, John. I'm glad to be here. I'm a motor fuels kind of expert guru that specializes in renewable energy, gasoline oxygenates, fuel specifications and regulations. So all those things are critically important to our retail gas stations these days.
So, Jeff, sometimes Christian and I will be at a meeting, we'll be talking, and people kind of avoid us because we kind of geek out a little bit. It's a fun time. There's so much going on, Christy. We talk about biofuels, talk about the fuels market a lot. And I was in South America recently, went to Brazil and Argentina, and they've got a different market. We've got changes in this industry. We have a lot of stores now announcing they're going to start offering E15, which for our listeners is a 15% ethanol blend with gasoline. We've got discussion with the automakers about trying to deliver higher octane fuel, which could include a 25% ethanol blend, maybe even more. From what you're seeing in the market, what are you seeing in terms of best growth opportunities, the role of the market, the balance and where we are in terms of how things are working in the industry? Is the ethanol industry healthy? Are we looking at a good growth opportunities? Your perspective, what are you seeing?
Well, I think, here in the U.S., we've been on a constant path of improving air quality and emissions. And, it took us about 20 years to get the lead out of gasoline, even though lead was a major health risk due to its neurotoxicity. But, then we moved from a lead-based octane boost to MTBE, methyl tertiary butyl ether, which leaked, from all kinds of shipping and handling operations and contaminated drinking water supplies. So, the stage has been set for a cleaner, more renewable energy to provide that necessary octane to gasoline. And I think ethanol and gasoline complement each other quite nicely. So ethanol, as it's moving in, it's improving emissions and it's, reducing greenhouse gases. But like you said, John, what do we need to do at the street level? Can we, are we already prepared to handle ethanol blended gasolines? And I think that's a source of debate and in significant investigation for our two industries.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot going on. I know you've been very active in some Fuels Institute research projects that are pending, looking at biofuels compatibility of infrastructure, looking at distribution efficiency. Jeff and I were talking previously about the distribution system. And, when I first started working on these issues back in the late 90s, the ability to move product from the Midwest to the coast was not guaranteed. There's a lot of uncertainty about our ability to do that. That's not the case today. I mean, we've got a great distribution infrastructure, and I know we're not pushing ethanol through pipelines right now, but that hasn't really limited the availability of product at the market, has it?
No, it has not. And I think, historically, ethanol didn't transfer in the gasoline pipelines primarily for two reasons. One, the pipelines were full. And number two, they were going the wrong direction for our production, right? Like you mentioned, the significant portion of ethanol is produced in the Midwest. So as we, expanded ethanol production volumes and the need and demand increased over the last 10 years, you did see some significant growth and investigation. Some real deep technical work had to be done so we understood how ethanol would be not only compatible with the pipelines, but compatible with the other products in the pipelines. And the Department of Transportation has done some significant work here. And not only do we now know how to do it, we know how to do it without any risk to the other products and to the pipeline itself. So we've got ethanol being transported in pipelines from Tampa into Orlando every day, and that that process has been going on for, I think, 4 or 5 years now without incident. So you may see, ethanol enter into some pipeline transportation, but I really think economics is going to drive that equation. If there's a pipeline that's conducive to where ethanol is produced, or where ethanol could enter a pipeline and ultimately make it to the consumer, I think that might be an option going forward. But as you've stated, the railroad industry has expanded significantly to be able to handle the volumes to take ethanol from its production or from a terminaling location into the marketplace.
Now, you both mentioned octane in this conversation already, and octane's been in the news. I think there's a fair amount of market confusion, if you will, with consumers. What is 87? What is 91? What is 93? And I think for a lot of people, when we survey, they think it's a percentage, or they think that there's. So, can we clarify? I know we all like to look at numbers and dive in deep, but what's the best way to explain to consumers what's the difference between octanes, what it does with your vehicles?
Well, I think the key thing is octane is the measure of a fuel's ability to resist knock in an engine. And if you think about back in the early 80s and mid 80s, you knew when your engine was knocking, you could hear it, bang, bang, bang. Well, the automakers have now put in knock arresters, so spark arresters. So if they think the engine is going to pre-ignite, which means the fuel ignites before the piston hits the right point in the cycle, they will actually back it off so that you don't have any damage to the engine. I think when we start talking about ethanol and octane, ethanol has an unbelievable octane value. It's a wonderful octane additive to the market, and we're already seeing that play out in the E15 market, right, Christy?
Yes, we are actually. Ethanol has been used to increase octane, and just to piggyback, and just so we're getting our whole technical geek, out in this conversation. Back in the 1990s, there were a lot of vehicle tests, engine tests, trying to determine what is the most effective way to measure and then to provide the marketplace the brackets around how to measure octane and then describe that to the consumer. So it's actually the pump octane, which is what we see when we pull up to a retail fuel dispenser. We see the mathematical average of a research and a motor octane. And for those of us, on the behind the scenes, on the gasoline, analysis side, we know that the higher the octane, the more torque or more horsepower or more effective thermal chemical, composition or conversion of the energy is in the engine. So as John mentioned, as we look at all the power, or all the struggles that our automobile industry is under on how to power their vehicles, we see that we've got increasing fuel economy standards. We've got increasing, demands on fuel to reduce sulfur and to reduce benzene and, to improve the vehicle emissions. We also see a quest by our government to introduce renewable energies. When you take all of those compounding, regulations, and you look at what changes we can make to gasoline, one of, the options looking forward is to look at ethanol's ability to increase octane, AKI, and what can we do with that increasing octane to meet these, compounding regulations for the automobiles.
And Jeff, one of the things the autos are looking at is right now they have to build engines that are tolerant of different fuels. What they would love to be able to do is optimize the design of an engine to operate on a much more narrow octane spectrum. And so if you could get a higher octane fuel, they can reduce the size of the engine, increase its power, efficiency, and emissions profile, which is a wonderful opportunity. As a car enthusiast, I love more power. I love more efficiency. It's wonderful. The challenge, Christy, that I'd love to have you weigh in on is as we start talking about an octane, high octane fuel that may be at 25% ethanol. Great news is Wayne Fueling Systems announced in the summer of 2016 that starting next year in 2017, every one of their dispensers is going to be a minimum of E25 compatible, which is a wonderful thing. We have an issue we have certain vehicles not allowed to run on it. We have certain dispensers and tank systems not allowed to sell it by law. And as a comparison, I was talking to some people down in Brazil who, the base gasoline there, Jeff, is 27% ethanol right now, and they've got a higher grade as well. they're using it in every engine. They're using it in cars, which are almost all flex fuel. They're using it in motorcycles. They're using it in lawnmowers. The United States in E15 says you can't use E15 in lawnmowers or motorcycles. So I asked the Brazilian counterpart, I said, I don't understand. How is that possible? His response, Christy, you'll get a kick out of this. He said, John, in Brazil, if you have an engine problem, you call a mechanic. In the United States, you call a lawyer. And there's so many options, I think, to expand our market in the United States for renewable fuels, but there's some legal hurdles we need to overcome. So from your perspective, what do we need to do to be able to open up the doors to be able to provide the autos with the high-octane fuel they're looking for that may include a higher blend of ethanol and get it to market as efficiently as we can?
Well, I think that's a good point. And one thing that I think that we all agree on is, historically, as the retail industry has been sensitive to dramatic changes in motor fuel, I think the future holds, is going to have history repeat itself. And there is that difficulty of legacy equipment, right? Equipment that's out there that's currently serving an excellent, purpose and need. And can it be expanded to new fuels? When we think about our continuous use of liquid fuels, that challenge seems surmountable. But when we think about moving to electric or battery-powered transportation, that seems to be a little more daunting, both financially and physically. I commute about 35 miles to the nearest town, and I couldn't use an electric vehicle at this point because I would run out of range. So I think that there's ways, especially when you have industry partnerships like Prime the Pump. When the ethanol industry realized that significant investment may be needed at the retail station in order to offer, blends with greater than 10% ethanol in the concentration, you saw the industry, rally together and pull funds and then go to retailers that could make a business decision to offer higher blends of ethanol. And then, the ethanol industry steps in and provides grant money or some kind of real financial incentive to get equipment changed over and upgraded to handle higher blends of ethanol.
I think your comment on liquid fuels is great because every forecast I'm looking at, even the Energy Information Administration, who is, the Department of Energy is in love with electric vehicles as well. They're saying that by 2035, 2040, liquid fuels are going to lose less than 5% of the transportation energy market. So the petroleum and renewable fuels market is strong going forward. There's some hurdles to increasing biofuels. E15 is now had several leading companies in the retail channel announce they're going to start selling E15 or already have done so. According to EPA regulations, the 2001 and newer vehicles, that's about 85% of the market. So 85% of consumers have vehicles approved by the federal government to run an E15. I'm going to ask you more of a policy question, though. The restriction on E15 in the summer because of vapor pressure requirements and the allowance of a 1 pound vapor increase in gasoline at 9 or 10% ethanol. Is there any technical reason why we should not extend that waiver to E15? My understanding is E15 has a lower vapor tendency than E10. Am I correct on that?
Yes, you are. Yes, gasoline and ethanol form what they call a non-ideal mixture at very low levels of ethanol. It's the alcohol nature of the ethanol molecule and the hydrocarbon nature of the gasoline that when you add them together in very low amounts of ethanol, you get this, increase in size, vapor pressure up to about 1 pound. And then after E10, it kind of caps off and then starts trailing off significantly. Ethanol's vapor pressure to start with is only about 3 psi, not even enough to start a car. So you can't run your car on pure ethanol. You have to have some kind of hydrocarbon in there to boost up its vapor pressure.
Now, back in the old...
as far as E10 versus E15 vapor pressure, we've studied this immensely. And the word is, those two fuels are identical, indistinguishable. And so having different vapor pressure regulations for whether you have a 10% ethanol gasoline blend or whether you have a 15% ethanol in gasoline blend, is unsubstantiated, technically, scientifically, or market-driven.
I like what you're just saying, talking about the where ethanol is today and how it powers vehicles. It was obviously much different back in the old days. And a couple examples I'm thinking in the 70s, we had gasohol. And I know that was the first latest entree into, I guess, higher ethanol levels. But before that, the first vehicles, 1880s, were all ethanol, weren't they? You went to the pharmacy and you got a beaker of some sort of ethanol, and that's how you drove your car. And obviously, engines are much more sophisticated now.
Yeah, agreed. Henry Ford's first Model T was our first FFV back in, early 1900s. But I think having ethanol power your entire vehicle could be a long-term goal. But I think at this point, gasoline consumption in the United States may have rebounded finally from our decrease in fuel consumption back in 2009 with the financial issues that our country had. But I think ethanol complements gasoline going forward, and I think that the two paired together, I think we can sure optimize and find, a near perfect blend of gasoline and ethanol that can meet all of our needs. Volume, it's a huge consideration when we have consumers that need to drive to work, and we've got a real innate love of our automobile, as John mentioned, and so we need to find ways to complement these two fuels together going forward.
So one of the objectives of the biofuels programs in the United States is to promote the development of advanced biofuels. Have you been paying attention to where we are in terms of progressing in our feedstock options? Right now, most of the ethanol produced in the United States is corn. Most of the ethanol produced down in South America is sugarcane, but there's this desire to start going into advanced cellulosic-based fuels. My understanding is there have been some great breakthroughs in the last couple of years in terms of technology. It really comes down to a scalability factor. Have you been watching that at all?
I have. And of course, living here in the Midwest and my family are farmers, the price of corn is at not a record low, but it's at a critical point of low price. And I think that we have broke through the technical barriers, the scientific barriers to find what it takes to make ethanol from cellulose or switchgrass, fast-growing trees, miscanthus, et cetera. But it then boils down to economics. So is it cost-effective to make these products? And at times, and especially times like today when corn prices are very low, ethanol is very cheap, being made from corn rather than other feedstocks. But I think that financial decision, in the future, you may see that tide turn.
Jeff, I think the drop in oil prices has had an effect on all alternative transportation. I think Christy's comment about the economic competitiveness of advanced technology biofuels really would be benefited if we went back to $100 oil. Now, there's a lot of consequences to doing that. I think there's a couple other things that need to be addressed, and I know NACS has public policy positions to do this in terms of extend that waiver to cover E15 to allow retailers to make a business decision, not a regulatory decision. Make a business decision about my customers are going to buy it, I'm going to sell it, or I'm not going to sell it. Let's get rid of these hurdles. Supporting the development of higher compatibility rated equipment, providing opportunities to have existing equipment that is technically compatible but not legally, let that be recertified so we can start moving into the market. I think there's some great opportunities. And like I said, I've been telling Christy, your groups for years, if we can demonstrate to retailers that they can make money, they're going to jump through hoops of fire to get product to market.
I couldn't agree more. But we do understand the sensitivities of, that those are real equipment and those are real challenges out there. So if we can demonstrate or at least ease into the, all of the financial obligations that it takes to offer higher blends of ethanol, our industry stands ready.
I guess I have one more technical question, because Jeff and I were talking about my trip to Brazil, and Brazil uses a hydrous ethanol, which is the base ethanol is 93% ethanol, 7% water, and we use an anhydrous, no water. What is really the difference there? I mean, I don't quite understand how they can be blending 7% water into their fuel, and we're not doing anything here. It seems to be a disconnect in terms of technology.
Well, it really has to do with how much water tolerance the fuels can hold. So the more ethanol you add, the more tolerance the fuel has to uptake and carry water through the system. gasoline was the original creator of phase separation. Every tank in America before there was any alcohol in gasoline had two phases, a water bottom and a gasoline phase. When you add ethanol, you either increase that that fuel's capability to hold water, or you push it past its saturation point where the ethanol will go with the hydrous, with the water layer, and then you'll end up with a gasoline that has no ethanol, and you'll end up with a water and alcohol layer. So what happens in Brazil is the hydrous portion of the ethanol, which has got about 5% water in it, gasoline, water, and ethanol, that'll all maintain a homogeneous solution unless there's ambient temperature or some other mechanical means to phase separate. But it's just a lower BTU value. But there's also a system prep, kind of like when we went from an all gasoline, all hydrocarbon gasoline system into, an ethanol gasoline blended system. We had to prep the infrastructure to get rid of the water so that when you had the ethanol and gasoline together and you had, what I'd consider appropriate levels of water present, that it would stay all in a homogeneous, solution. And that's, I think, the key to whether you're going to offer hydrous blends or anhydrous blends of gasoline and ethanol. The whole difference is system prep and making sure that you stay in the water's tolerant, or in the fuel's water tolerance region.
Christy, thank you. You've given me the opportunity to geek out. I don't think we've ever used ambient temperature, homogeneous, any of these technical terms, hydrous, in a podcast for NACS yet. And so you gave us an opportunity to really put our propellers on our heads and enjoy the conversation. So thank you very much.
Google those words, folks.
Well, we're sure thankful for the Fuels Institute, and we think the National Association of Convenience Stores is a fantastic organization. So appreciate all the work you guys do.
Thanks, Christy.
And thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
You've been listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. For more information about the National Association of Convenience Stores, go to nacsonline.com.